For this next video, we are going to write comparison functions that allow us to compare arrays and determine if they contain the same elements. And we are going to use those also to rewrite a little bit the code of our test function to make them a little bit more automated. Meaning that instead of visually inspecting, if the original array has been sorted properly into the sorted array, we are going to have an ID in a variable of what the sorted array should look like, do the comparison, and only display an error message if actually the sorting didn't work. So to be able to get there, we are going to have to use a Boolean returning method function called int_array compare, and the very first version of comparison that we're going to implement is compare by position. So what do I mean by compare by position? By comparing by position, what I mean is we are going to look at the first element of one array, make sure it's the same value than the first element of the second array. Then the second element of the first array, we're going to compare it to the second element of the second array. Then the third element, and so on and so forth. We go by position in the array. We make sure that at every index in both arrays, we have the same value. So we are going to use two arrays, okay, to do that. The idea is that we should not modify those arrays, so I'm going to declare them as const int parameter, and I'm going to have data1 here, and then const int data2, and then I want their size, and there we are, int size. Okay, so that is the first comparison function that we're going to implement. Let's go ahead, take this header here. If I can cut and paste it, that is. Need to have some problem here. Let's see. Yeah, the VM is having some difficulty there. Okay, let's try again. Correct. Let's save that file. Okay, be right back. Need to check why this VM is acting up. Alright, it seems to be playing nice now. I have no idea what was going on here. So we're able to save the file. We're able now to do a cut and paste and go into the how.c and paste actually our prototype, which we are going to expand into a bona fide implementation of this function. Alright, so I have, let me reindent things a little bit here. So I have a const int data1, which is my first array, const int data2, which is my second array. I forgot the square brackets here. And then I have the size of both arrays here. There we go. So let me go back and fix also the prototype before I forget. So two arrays and the size of those arrays are going to be my parameter. So how do I go ahead and do a comparison by position? Well, I'm going to have to iterate, right? I'm going to have to iterate over each position of the array, and I'm going to have to look at whether the elements are the same in each of the array. Well, that's easy enough to do. So watch out, by the way, I'm using bool here, so that means that I should make sure that I include std, which one is it? This is stdbool.h. There we go, stdbool.h. Okay. So that I can use a data type bool because it's not part of the basic data types available without any inclusion of any header file from the library. Okay. So booleans have been added a little late in the game to the C language. So what I want to be able to do here, I want to be able to do a for loop. That for loop is going to say for int I equals 0, I lesser than, so I called it size I plus plus. And what I want to do inside, I want to compare the element at index I in the array data1 to the element at index I in the array data2. If they are equal, we're good. Okay. If they are not equal, then I can already jump to the conclusion that those two arrays that I'm trying to compare by position are not equivalent. So I can return false right there. Okay. So let's write this. If So I was talking about comparing data 1 index I and checking if it's different than data 2 index I, and if it is indeed different, return false. If I go through the entire loop and I didn't find any elements that were different, then I can safely assume that the two arrays were indeed the same. And now I can go ahead and get rid of the superfluous curly braces here, 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 and here. There we go. Because every time I have one statement only in the for loop, and inside the if statement to execute if the condition is true, I have only one statement as well. So I can dispose of those curly braces. That should be it. Let's check if we have something that compiles here. It compiles. Now, how am I going to test it? I'm going to go to test.c, and I'm going to write a function void test int array compare by position. And I'm going to write the code for it here. And still this part here to do my prototype right here. Don't forget to put the semicolon here. And of course I should call it from within the main. Let me be lazy and do a paste here. There we go. Test int array compare by position. So what am I going to do here? So I want to test a bunch of different arrays. With a bunch of different arrays, I want to test that I'm capable to recognize when they are the same, when they are different. So I could go ahead and declare a bunch of arrays like so. I could say int 1. Don't have a more original name that comes to mind. And I'm going to say, for example, this array is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm going to keep them relatively short. Then I can say I have an array named 2. We have a theme there going on. And I'm going to say that this array number 2 is, for example, 2, 1, 3, 4. So it's different. Okay. So I already have enough to make a few comparisons. I could say, for example, int array compare by position. And if I pass 1 and 1 of size 4, so let's put the size in a constant here. We're not going to type that all the time. Const int size equals 4. There we are. So I'm going to say this is 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 and size. So if I compare the first array to itself, I would expect that the return value from that is going to be true. Okay, this is the same array. So if it's true, then everything's working fine. If it's not true, so if not true, so if not return value, so that means if I return a false, then this is going to be true, then I want to display an error. I want to display something that gives me some information about what exactly happened here. And I want to say, for example, here's the opening curly brace, closing curly brace. I want to say something like, here's the original array, here's the first array, here's the second array, and they are not comparing right. So I'm going to steal some code here. I'm not going to rewrite this from scratch. Okay. And I'm going to insert it here, and I'm going to say, so it's no longer about original and sorted array, it's about array number 1. I'm going to say here for that printf error. And we are going to display array number 1, array number 2. So int array display array, that's going to be, the first one that I used was 1 of size. I don't want to sort it, that was for the over test. And then array number 2, I'm going to display that was also the array named 1 of size. Okay? So if compare by position is not returning what I expect, then I'm going to display an error message and display the two arrays like so. Okay? Let's combine this, run it. Running tests on all function, it doesn't display anything. Well, what if, so that means that it's working. What if I had tested the opposite here? Then it would display error. Array 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4. Array 2 is 1, 2, 3, 4. This should be the same. They were not returned, how to say, they were not compared, sorry, as being the same by my inter-array compare by position method. So I just realized that I forgot to display at the beginning of most of those functions here that what we are testing, so it doesn't matter for now, but we can always go back at the end and do that. So I have compared 1 and 1. I expect true to be returned, so if not, then there is a problem. And then I can do the same kind of thing here, but this time, instead of comparing the array 1 to the array 1 itself, I'm going to compare the array 1 to the array 2. And this time I expect that the compare by position is going to return false. So if it returns true, then I'm going to display error again, array 1, array 2, etc. So let's run this. Compile it first. Let's make sure it compiles. Let's run it. Again, no problem. So what if I was expecting the opposite here? So that should be wrong. A.out. Array 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Array 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I did forget to change what I display here. So since I compared array named 1 with array named 2, I need to change what I display here. Absolutely. So let's try again. Compile. Run it. Array 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4. Array 2 was 2, 1, 3, 4. And yes, it told me that they were the same. And here I put a not. So that's what caused the error to trigger. But my function to compare them by position apparently works just fine. Okay. So, and I have those tests here, and you can add more tests, okay? Obviously, you can go through all the permutation of 4 arrays if you want, of arrays of 4 elements, sorry, if you want, and you can run all of those through the compare, inter-array compare by position function to make sure it works. What we are going to do here, so I'll leave that as an exercise if you want to, but what we are going to do next in the video, we are going to go back to our how.h, and we are going to say that we want another type of function to compare the content of two arrays. And this one is going to still return a Boolean. It's going to be compared by content. So comparing by content means that I want to make sure that I don't care about the order, really, but I want to make sure that both arrays data1 and data2 contains the same element, the same values, in the same number of time. Okay? So for example, if I have the value 1 4 times in the first array, I want to find the value 1 exactly 4 times somewhere in the second array. Okay, so this is no longer about comparing position by position, it's about comparing all the values that are in one array to the other and making sure that they occur, all of them occur with the same number of instances, occurrences. So I'm going to write inter-array compare by content. So it does exactly the same interface, like signature. You take two arrays, you take a size, and you return a Boolean to let me know if they are or are not the same. And I'm going to write this, implement this function here. There we go. Open curly brace, close curly brace. And now we're going to try to be as lazy as we can, but the good kind of lazy. Okay, we're not going to scheme on tests or something like that, but we are going to try to actually implement this as efficiently as possible. So we have already inter-array compare by position that works. Okay, we have also the ability to sort an array. So if I want to know whether in two different arrays I have the same elements, exactly the same elements, represented the same number of times throughout the array. One of the way I could do that, one of the easiest way I could do that is I sort my first array, I sort my second array, ascending order, and then I compare them by position. So I'm going to be able to implement this new feature, this new function, by reusing functions that I already have available. Of course, that means that if dot functions are not thoroughly tested, then most likely they have a bug, most likely this one is going to have a bug. But we have been testing as we go, so we have been making sure that our function work before to go to the next function and implement that next function. So that allows us also to benefit from the availability of those functions. So what are we going to do? We are talking about sorting int array sort data1. We're talking about sorting data2. Okay. And then return int array compare by position data1, data2, size. And I forgot to pass the size to my sorting function call here, size and size. So that's the general idea. Okay, that's the general idea of what we are trying to do here. However, data1 and data2 are arrays of const int element. So I cannot change those elements. So if I cannot change those elements, I'm not going to be able to swap them and permutate them and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to say I want a TMP1 array of size, size. I want a TMP2 array of size, size as well. And I want to copy inside those arrays the values of the elements in data1 and data2. So I'm going to do that with a for loop for int I equals 0, I lesser than size, I plus plus, my usual counter control loop. And I want to do two assignments here, tmp1 index I equals data1 index I, and then tmp2 index I equals data2 index I. So I make a copy of the array data1 in tmp1 and a copy of the array data2 in tmp2. After that, I am free to sort tmp1 because it's not the array that was passed as parameter, it's a copy of it. And I'm free to sort tmp2 as well. And then I can compare by position tmp1 with tmp2 and return whatever the result of that comparison is. Well, let's try this. First, let's get rid of compilation error, none of them, okay? Let's, if we run it right now, we are not running anything interesting because we are not testing yet the compare by content. So I'm going to comment this, and I'm going to say I want to write a method test int array compare by content, and I want to actually declare the header, the prototype for that function first, void, here we are, and then I want to take this, and I want to actually implement it after the main. Compare by position is here, compare by content is going to go right here. All right, so what do I want to do in compare by content? Well, it's kind of almost exactly the same thing here that I did with compare by position, okay? So I'm going to have maybe more tests here. I'm going to see about that, but right now I'm going to start with pretty much this version of the code here as a starting point. Here we are. Go back here. All right. So right now, if I say simply that I have two arrays, 1 and 2, and I want to just compare by content, I can do this like so. save it. Make sure I only run the compare by content so that I don't have to deal with a bunch of output there. Compile, run. Error 1234 and 2134 do not actually compare favorably by content. Let me make sure first that I don't have the logic of my test twisted because I was trying to trigger like errors, remember, last time. So compare by content. If I compare 1 and 1, I should get a true. So negation of true, that means there was an error. If I compare 1 and 2, I should get a false. Negation of false should give me a true, which means it works. So if interarray compare blah 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 is false, then displays the error that we have here. So what's going on here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4. This looks like they are okay. So I took a quick look, and this is exactly what happened here. It's the test.c. This should be negation, right? If the two arrays are the same in comparison by content, it's going to return true. If it returns true, I don't want to display an error. I want to display an error only when it returns false for this particular case. So that means that here, same thing, which should, no, this one was correct. It's this one that actually should be still true. So it was false that I expected here because by position they are not the same. However, by content they are the same, so I need to change that. Which means I should add at least a few more arrays here. For example, an array where I have 1, 1, 2, 3, and an array where I have, for example, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1. Okay? And we are going to compare that by content. So I'm going to go ahead, grab this here. And I'm going to run another test. That other test is going to compare. So let's start by 3 and 4 because they should be the same, right? So if I compare 3 and 4, so if this returns true, which is correct, I don't have anything to do, okay? If it returns false, then I'm going to negate the false. It's going to trigger that if statement, and I'm going to display here 3 and 4. Let's try to get it right this time. All right. So we have here our logic for the test. What else? Well, I could have another test, finally, that's going to test that to make sure that my function knows how to return false when it needs to return false. Okay, so I'm going to expect the function to return false. So if it returns true, then I'm going to display error, and I'm going to compare, for example, 4 and 2. So 4 and 2, let's double check to be sure. 4 and 2, yeah, different content, definitely. Let's save that. GCC test, a.out. Okay, every test is passing with flying colors. Okay, so there we are. We're going to wrap it up for this video. We have an implementation of compare by content, an implementation of compare by position. Compare by position was a lot easier than compare by content, but more interestingly, I want you to get used to this kind of approach here, where we are composing our functions with one another, right? Not really composing in a mathematical sense, but we are reusing the code that we already wrote to implement for a function. So of course, like I said already, that means that you have to be particularly careful about making sure that you test thoroughly the functions that you write. Otherwise, if you make a mistake in one of those core functions that you write at the beginning, then that mistake is going to snowball through your entire library, for your entire implementation. But the point is to try to reuse code between programmer, between projects, but also within the same project and the same programmer. So what we are doing here is we are doing pretty much the standard, the industry standard of how we would write this this function, assuming that we don't care too much about performance. Okay, if we do care about performance, then maybe there is a good argument here that should be made about trying to avoid, sorting two arrays and stuff like that. But that's a question for the next course that you are going to take. All right. data structure generally is the one where we talk about efficiency and performance of algorithm, not program design. All right, once again, let's wrap it up for now, and I'll see you in the next video.